there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com with this week's episode of the Rogues Alley. For this week, I'm going to stick to the Evolutionary Leap Cryptolith Rite combo. I want to play in a different type of build. In the past 2 weeks, we've been doing it with Thopters, because the Thopters getting haste through either Dragon Tempest or the Thopter Engineer is incredibly powerful with Cryptolith Rite. But that's really the big advantage you get from red. The Descent of the Dragons and the Dragon Tempest was a pretty cool combo, and it did win me a lot of games, but I think it just might be a little too cute for standard. So for this week, I'm going to try a Bant list with the Cryptolith Rite Evolutionary Leap and a lot of different Eldrazi's to try to ramp into the Ulamog or the Great Aurora in the sideboard, or just out-tempo, kind of flood the board, kind of play a very similar role as the kind of the green-white tokens plays in just stabilizing and then eventually just getting through with enough tokens or Westvale Abbey. So just to recap, on the last 2 weeks we've been playing the Thopter brew with the Cryptolith Rite Evolutionary Leap, and I would say I've played well over 100 matchups, and it has a phenomenal record. I think the only matchup I'm really struggling with is old school Bant Collected Company, which I think if we get mediocre draws each, then this deck wins. But if it's slightly, if I get my best draw and Bant gets their best draw, usually the Bant Company deck will beat me, because even though statistically the best thing that we can put together can get out an Ulamog or Great Aurora quite quickly, it can't really keep up with just how fast like Reflector Mage tempo can win with the Bant Company deck. So besides that, I think that's the glaring matchup that is below average for these Cryptolith Rite Evolutionary Leap decks. The ones that are really good against, I think Seasons Past Control is probably my best matchup, because it's just so much card advantage through the Evolutionary Leap, and even the Westvale Abbey's a card that's very hard for the Seasons Past decks to deal with, and then Ulamog's extremely hard for Seasons Past. And then any sort of very aggressive strategies like Humans is pretty easy for this deck, and any red-based aggro, there is a few running around here and there, are very easy. And I'd say a lot of the control matchups are quite favorable for the Cryptolith Rite decks as well. I would say Aristocrats is pretty 50-50, and green-white tokens, it depends on I think the mediocre draws and average draws, the Cryptolith Rite decks have the advantage, but again, if the green-white tokens has one of those extremely explosive draws, then it can be hard to keep up with. So anyway, for this week, I'm going to stick with the shell, and this one is not going to try to win with Descent of Dragons. In fact, we have Ulamog and the Great Aurora still in the sideboard, so that's still staying pretty similar to the other list that we played with for the past 2 weeks. This one is going to use a lot of card advantage through Eldrazi Displacer, being able to bounce the like Whirler Rogues and Eyeless Watchers and Pilgrim's Eyes, Drowner of Hopes as well, and Prophet of Distortion. And this card has been extremely good with the Cryptolith Rite. Now, post-rotation, we're going to lose all the Thopters, so I'm thinking Eldrazi is the way to go. What I really like about Prophet of Distortion is that it's a 1 mana, which is exactly what you want to see with like Cryptolith Rite or even Loam Dryad. And you can pop it out first turn. It's a 1/2, so you can block their 1/1s if they happen to have a 1/1. And then for 4 mana, you can draw a card. Through Cryptolith Rite, that's so easy, and a lot of our lands being able to tap for colorless mana, you can draw like 2 cards in a turn. It feels very similar to Duskwatch Recruiter. We know how powerful Duskwatch Recruiter is. Well, Prophet of Distortion is actually pretty good about digging for your like Evolutionary Leap or Cryptolith Rite. I think the old Teamer build for Thopters, I would put the Prophet of Distortion in instead of the Fairy, whatever the Fairy I was using in that deck, as this deck can actually dig for the combo. I think one of the problems is through Evolutionary Leap and Duskwatch Recruiter, it's easy to find your creature pieces to the deck, but very hard to find the non-creature spells. So Prophet is extremely good. In testing, I was able to draw so many cards against the mono-blue Jace's Sanctum deck. The Prophet just kept me filled for answers, or for more threats, and eventually found the cards that I needed to finish off, and especially Prophet was very good against the Seasons Past decks as well, those type of control-based decks. Hangarback Walker still seems to be very good in the format, so you can see this shell is very, very, very similar to kind of these other decks that I played. So the reason why, if you might look at this list and say, hey, there's really no win con in here. I mean, we have Whirler Rogue that puts out 2/1/1s, Eyeless Watcher that puts out 2/1/1s, the Skyspawner that puts out a 1/1, and the Displacer to flicker, and then cards like Evolutionary Leap and Duskwatch Recruiter keep our hand full, and Hangarback Walker can get a little bit out of hand, but nothing like pumps it up like Nissa or Gideon through the green-white tokens. I've found that in Standard, you don't need those. You don't need a win condition. Versus a lot of these decks, or a traditional, like, this is going to win me the game. Against the traditional tier 1 decks, I think you just need to basically outlast them or grind them out. We have on one end of the spectrum is very, very heavy control-based decks. On the other end of the spectrum is a hyper-aggressive mono-white humans deck. And then in the middle, we have like green-white tokens and Bant Company that just have value after value after value. So I think this deck matches up very well against all three of those strategies. Against aggressive decks, Hangarback Walker is extremely good. So is the Blisterpod, and just any Cryptolith Rite deck, any the Skyspawner Watchers, Rogues are they're going to clog the board up, and it's going to be very hard for humans to get through. Then against other value-based decks, well, we're a value deck, and a lot of times I can outvalue them, and then that's when our sideboard comes in, and cards like the Great Aurora and Ulamog just completely take over the game. And then versus control decks, the value can pace them or out-tempo them, and eventually just grind them down. So that's why I'm liking these type of decks at the moment. So anyway, let's just go through the whole deck tech. I'm going to run, basic land-wise, we're just going to run the 5 forests and 3 islands and 1 plains that we can tutor up with the Pilgrim's Eye. And then we're going to run the 4 Westvale Abbeys that are that good, 2 Spawning Bends, 2 Prairie Streams, and then 3 Lumbering Falls, as well as a playset of Yavimaya Coasts. We have the Prophet of Distortion, Blisterpod, Loam Dryad. I found that 6 1-drops is the sweet spot. As Lumbering Falls will come into play tapped a lot on turn number 1, and even like Prairie Stream can come into play tapped on turn number 1. The 2-drops is very loaded with Duskwatch Recruiter, Hangarback Walker, Cryptolith Rite, Evolutionary Leap. And then 3-drops we have Skyspawner, Eldrazi Displacer, Pilgrim's Eye, and then as our 4-drops, Eyeless Watcher and Whirler Rogue to keep the board full of 1/1s to either chump block or use Cryptolith Rite to just ramp out. I'm running a 1 of Oblivion Sower because this can be our main board win condition, just flickering Eldrazi Displacer until they're eventually milled out. That actually has happened before. And Drown of Hope can also take over the game quite quickly with just a 5/5. They can tap down blockers and get in there. Between Eldrazi Displacer and Drown of Hope attacking in for 8 damage and then tapping down any sort of blockers, I think that this is a really good strategy. What's really good about Displacer and Drown of Hope is opposing Westvale Abbeys are not very good versus this deck. Of course, our 1/1 flyers through the Whirler Rogue can just chump block and then be sacked, and same thing with Hangarback Walker. So Westvale's not that big of an issue for this deck. The sideboard is going to have 4 Clash of Wills and 1 Negate, as well as another Oblivion Sower that we bring in versus both the mid-range value-based decks as well as control. 2 Great Auroras, they're very good against control. 2 Ulamogs. 2 Warping Wails, this is really in here for Languish, and there also is some other annoying sorcery speed cards that we can counter with Warping Wail. And then a 1 of World Breaker and 2 Den Protectors just for added value. That's the list that I've had the most success with. I mean, I wanted to bring like a Pulse of Marasa back in against the incredibly hyper aggressive decks, but I found it unnecessary. And at one point I had 3 Great Auroras in this deck as well, but I thought 2 was the sweet spot. I like to run a lot of 2-ofs in these type of decks because you're usually going to go through about 30 cards in your deck before the game ends. These are very grindy matchups. So 2 is going to usually see at least 1 of them. So we don't need to see 2 Ulamogs. We can just see the 1. And same with the Great Aurora. I thought about putting a From Beyond in here as well. I think that post-rotation, when From Beyond gets pretty cool in like a 4-color Eldrazi deck is going to be very easy still because we still have the Corrupted Crossroads. And Sire Stagnation is seeming to be a pretty good card in the metagame. Just the Sire Stagnation is a 6-mana Eldrazi. Whenever an opponent plays a land, they exile top 2 cards of their library, and you get to draw 2 cards. So against like those grindy matchups, it kind of like is our version of the Tireless Tracker. So anyway, we're going to queue this up in probably we'll do this in a league and see how well we do with this version. And we'll try to go back to the drawing board for future Rogues Allies. I've just been really obsessed with this Cryptolith Rite Evolutionary Leap combo and trying to find the sweet spot for the right list And I highly suggest trying these out, because I don't know if it's just a fluke on my end, but again, I've played over 100 games with these on MTGO with these type of brews, and have been doing very, very well with them. Anyway, this has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching.